Willkommen bei Sales Pepper, dem modernen Vertriebspodcast für alle, die keinen Bock mehr haben auf 0815-Vertrieb. Hello and welcome back to Sales Pepper. My name is Dominic, I'm your podcast host. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about this magic word, Sales Enablement. I brought someone who was already building enablement teams at Parloa and also at Uberall. So very interesting conversation going on here today. And hello, welcome, Ambre.
Thanks a lot, Dominic, for having me. Yeah, I'm really pleased to do this episode with you. And I feel enablement is a big buzzword lately, so I'm more than happy to clarify a bit what it is.
Yeah, me too. And also looking forward to our conversation today. We talked a lot about this stuff already beforehand, but before we jump into the topic, maybe let's start with a little introduction about yourself. I already mentioned you work for a unicorn company or like a Sunicorn company with Uberall, but maybe you can also explain a bit like what are you most proud of if you look back, and also what are you doing today?
Yeah, for sure. As you said, I worked in those different businesses, and I think I kind of specialized into the startup, scale-up, hyper-growth phase at some point. I ended up in enablement kind of randomly, to be honest. I started working in a sales team, and then I was told, this is something you'd be good at. I just give it a shot, and I loved it. And I've been building my career in this for the past 7 years, a bit more. So this is definitely something I'm proud of. It's not easy to start building something that no one really knows about, right? And I mean, still today, not a lot of people understand enablement, but back to 7 years ago, even less. So that was definitely a big challenge. And so after those few years of working in those different businesses, I thought I'd like to do it with more businesses. And I decided to start my own consulting business, so Scaling Edge. I just launched it 4 months ago now, so it's still quite fresh. And I'm offering this type of services, so offering enablement services to different scale-ups globally.
Nice. I also heard about Sales Enablement the first time when I was working at Pleo back then, also SaaS unicorn. And from my experience, there's also like a lot of companies start thinking about Sales Enablement when they raise their Series C or even Series B sometimes. But what's your experience? Like, what's the best moment to actually look into that topic? And maybe let's start with that question.
That's a good one, and the answer is not going to please, but there's not a specific moment, I would say, where it's like the get-go of launching sales enablement or trying to hire for enablement roles. From my perspective, it's always a question of where the business stands, whether it's Series A, B, C, or even seeds around sometimes. The main purpose of enablement is to scale across whether it's regions or teams or different product lines even. And so you can only do this once you kind of have some successes, right? So if you have 2 AEs and you already want to hire enablement, it might be a bit early from my perspective. I would focus on getting some external enablement support, hire freelancers to support on specific initiatives. But if you have already, let's say, 5, 6 AEs and you're starting to see some specific deals closed in certain ways and you want to scale this go-to-market approach, this is where you want to start thinking about having enablement. Rule of thumb, I always say it's somewhere between Series A and B that is like the ideal time, but as I said, it depends also, of course, on the business. And if it's later than this, it's okay. It's not a disaster to start too late, but it becomes more challenging to implement if the teams are way bigger.
Kurze Pause, bevor es weitergeht. Zeit für unseren Partner Kickscale. Jeder, der im Sales arbeitet, kennt es. Admin-Kram nervt. Stundenlang Meeting-Notizen tippen, CRM aufräumen, E-Mails schreiben und dabei möchtest du doch eigentlich nur verkaufen. Mit Kickscale geht das auf Knopfdruck. Das Tool nimmt deine Sales Calls DSGVO-konform auf, fasst alles automatisch zusammen, überträgt die Infos direkt ins CRM und erstellt sogar eine fertige E-Mail für deinen Kunden. Weniger tippen, mehr Sales. Und als Hörer bekommst du exklusiv 50 kostenlose Meeting-Analysen. Link in den Shownotes. Und jetzt geht's weiter mit der Folge. Yeah, also from my experience is like a lot of times is that the head of sales or the VP sales actually taking care of the sales enablement part before sales enablement team is actually built. So they are building playbooks, they're coaching the reps, and then like what you mentioned, I liked it a lot because you said like it's about scaling. So I think from my perspective, there was a lot of times when you don't even know why one person is performing better than the other, but you know it's like there is gaps. And I think for me, what Sales Enablement also brings is kind of a scalable process, let's say, and repeatable success. So it's like this is what works for us, and this is what we need to scale, and also like what's not working, let's try to get rid of it. Maybe you can tell a bit more about like your biggest key learnings. I mean, this is like some like two of the like Germany's most successful companies that you've worked for. So from my perspective, like it would be super interesting to learn more about like, do you see patterns or like maybe what are your key learnings when you look back when building these kind of orgs? Yeah,
definitely a lot of patterns, but also a lot of differences. I think one big learning for me that I will for sure implement in any future project is always take a step back and trying to understand what is the expectation. Because especially right now, there's a big buzz around enablement and a big hype around it, which means that I would very often speak with founders telling me, oh, we really want this certification pitch, or this pitch certification, or we want to have this playbook. But they don't really know what they expect with a playbook and what it is and how it should solve. So my biggest learning for me as an enablement person, but also that advice I would share with anyone, is take a step back and look at what you're trying to solve with that. So not focus so much on the deliverables, but more on what are the gaps that you're trying to solve. And very often enablement can help, sometimes not at all, right? So like it's also something to be aware of. And I think because I was in this position of not being really sure what enablement is, or like having to really pitch constantly what it is, that I would be willing to jump into doing something just to please the C-level, saying like, oh, I guess if they want it, I'm just going to do it. So at least they have something to keep for themselves and be happy with. But at the end, this is something that they look back at and ask, what's the impact of this? Then
a follow-up question to that, because you said, what is enablement for you? And also, what is it not? Like this is, I think, a great follow-up question, because some people even don't know maybe, but also mistaking sales enablement sometimes. So what is it for you?
I'm pretty sure you'll have different answers to anyone you ask this question. For me, really, enablement, I see it as like the revenue execution system. So the aim of enablement is to execute on the company's strategy. And this is done by equipping the teams with the right documentation, processes, training is part of it, of course, but not only, right? So it's really here to make sure that whatever the strategy is defined, it gets executed. It's more about the change management and driving adoption than it is about just providing content and training. And so that's what is not for me is a training machine, for example. Definitely not.
That's what coaches normally are for, but
it's a very different expertise also, right? Like the change management versus the training part is not necessarily the same skill set and expertise. So
One thing that I've seen in many organizations, or not many, but in some organizations, is when sales enablement is doing their work, it's sometimes very disconnected to the sales team. So what I mean by that is that there's someone putting effort and like building something for the teams, but then it's actually not accepted, or like there's no, let's say, pressure behind it, that it's actually executed, that what you mentioned. So, and this sometimes is because salespeople say, hey, this person never sold the product, like why they know how I should sell my product. And then it's like they don't get like on board with the whole project. So this is like this disconnect, and then of course it's not really working out pretty well in most cases.
Absolutely.
What are the biggest mistakes you have seen, like when implementing sales enablement, and like what are like common pitfalls that you should avoid?
I think one that just goes with what you mentioned is not focusing on adoption enough. So spending a lot of time on trying to define the perfect playbook and the best documentation and the best training, but not as much time into making sure that this is adopted in the long run. There's many different reasons why something might not be adopted. Of course, the fact that sometimes it comes from completely outside of the sales team is one challenge. So my recommendation is always to involve them in the process, or at least get a few champions within the teams.
How could that look like?
Very specific example. Let's say we want to implement a new qualification methodology. Like I've done it with MEDPIC or SPIN or like many different ones. Instead of working in silos where you would have just enablement and potentially product marketing working on a pitch together that match this qualification and working on the talk tracks and all of this, let's get the best performing AE from the team to see how this person works, what they do well, what they achieve during the process, and then try to standardize this way. So it's not so much enablement, providing information saying you should do like this, but it's more saying we've seen that the most successful reps in the team are following exactly those steps, are doing this type of tactics, qualifying in a specific way. So please make sure to follow that. And it's not coming from just us using ChatGPT and saying this is how it works. Yeah. Right? So I think it's involving the people in the right time and in the right manner. And again, enablement cannot be the expert on everything. So of course, thinking that one person can be an expert on qualification and negotiation and pitching and all that is unrealistic. Yeah. But enablement is here to use the different champions of those different topics and scale their best practices, right?
Yeah, I love that, because this also reminds me on how we worked at Pleo back then, before we had an enablement team, because we hired like, I think 10 to 15 new reps, like just in AEs in 1 year. And they're also like, it was a tricky time, because then we had no domain experts for every topic. So there was just one person teaching all of the knowledge to everyone. But then over time, we also saw, okay, this person is actually very good at asking questions, or this person is very good on LinkedIn. Let's like give them like a side project and say, you are responsible for teaching new reps how you do it, because you do it very well. And it's also a good chance, I think, to give AEs or like reps the possibility to show like leadership skills, like before they become a leader, right? So like also teaching them how to teach other people. Yeah. How would you say, like, because you mentioned taking the best performers, normally was job of the head of sales or VP sales to say, okay, these are the people who perform very well. Now, if I look at the last 1 to 3 years, we see a lot of AI out there, and also Parloa was an AI company. So how do you see AI leveraging sales enablement, but also where do you see limitations?
Yeah, I think for like the use of AI in enablement, it's a game changer, like in many different areas. From my perspective, where it has the most leverage is when it comes to content creation and knowledge management, but also analyzing the performance of the reps, right, through the different tools and seeing whether it's through the call recordings or through the CRM data, seeing who is performing how. So this really helps accelerating any project. And sometimes even making it better. Documenting can be really, really long process. So sometimes AI can do it better. I definitely see a lot of limits though. And when I hear that AI is going to replace enablement fully, I don't really believe that, especially because, as I said, from my perspective, enablement is more a question of change management and driving adoption. And this is not done through AI right now, right? Like we don't have an AI that can really align different parts of the organization, humans together to speak to each other, and then ensuring that whatever is rolled out is being adopted in the long run. Yeah. So there's some limits, but I highly recommend anyone to start using it, because it's just a game changer in how fast you can go on certain projects, and it's way more efficient.
And I also think that a lot of companies don't really understand how powerful the existing data is already. Like,
absolutely.
It's like you can build so much great stuff with the existing core recordings and stuff like this, to just upload it somewhere and make playbooks out of it with like just one button. It's insane. Like you can literally, like with just 1-2 clicks, you can build things that normally would take like 3-4 days for a head of sales to build. So it's like
even
it's
months.
Crazy.
Yeah, when you think about call recordings, that's one thing, for example, where I feel strongly about, like, this is a waste of data at so many levels. I mean, there's so many different tools out there to use for that, but I've seen many times that the sales leads would just use it to sometimes review one call or something like this, or just one specific conversation with a customer. They will share this one. but there's so much more power in that data, because it's literally seeing how your team behave and how they pitch, and seeing how the best performers are actually closing, not with just one call, but throughout the entire process, with all those little steps in the process. So it's so powerful, and it's definitely underused right now.
Yeah, also, what are the customers saying, right? What is like the most common questions that come up, and how people react to it? So you also know where to coach people. I think this is like also when looking to this kind of AI software, it's normally like a huge impact you can have by just looking at the data.
Yeah, there's one project I worked on where we were working with product marketing, using all those call recordings to define the talk tracks and the specific qualification, question, objection handling, and so on, because it's there. Like, you don't even have to think about it. It's literally all the data is there.
Yeah.
And that works also well and has a better adoption. Again, going back to the adoption pace and involving the team, is because it's coming from them. It's just that we are the one packaging it somehow and delivering it in a way that we can scale with it. So it's not only to one team, but to many different teams, regions, or product. But yeah, this is definitely one of the data that we need to use more.
Yeah. And looking to like the market currently, there's, I mean, a lot of startups out there that are really struggling, and also money is not like available that it used to be, like back like 2-3 years ago. So I think what I've seen in the market is as well, like that a lot of enablement teams would just like let go, because they say, okay, it's not, bringing the value that we see or whatever, but it's like one of the orgs that I actually cut out very fast. And maybe question to that from your side is, what would you recommend founders or revenue leaders that don't have a lot of budget but would like to start with good sales enablement? Like, can you share like 2-3 points that they could follow to make it work without spending a lot of money and hiring someone, for example?
Definitely understand that, especially if it's early stages. As I said, it doesn't always make sense to have a full-time hire for that. First step is always, as I said, like taking a step back and looking into what needs to be achieved. What do you understand by enablement, and how do you want to set it up? From my perspective, one of the very first thing to do is in terms of documentation and processes. It's almost operational excellence focus, right? It's like whatever you do as a sales team, even if it's just 1 or 2 AEs, ensure that you kind of know what is happening and who is doing what. Do some A/B testing, but structure it in a way that you really understand this, so you can know what needs to be scaled, what is the best practice that you want to replicate. And then the second part is, of course, hire some external support also, right? I think there's a few people, including myself, offering this type of services to get started, just to have an idea of what is the situation, do an audit, and then have some recommendation in terms of how to get started. So you don't need to have right away a full enablement team early on, but get some initiatives in place. And many often, just like you mentioned at Pleo, what was happening is that a lot of it is being done in-house by different teams, which is completely fine when you have limited resources. Like in a 10-people startup, of course, no one has a clear job description, right? But at least try to structure it and be sure that this is happening in the right way. And this is when having someone external can help. Not that saying that they're going to take over, but at least give the right guidance and recommendation. So it's not a waste of time at the end.
And also when I look back, like, I think sometimes when you ask the reps, like, hey, what are you doing differently? Like, you're super successful, but what are you doing differently than the others? And normally you don't get a clear answer. So sometimes it's really good to have someone who's just really taking the bird's eye perspective for a while, and just like having a look at what are people actually doing, and then really make a plan out of it. Okay, how can we leverage that, right? Because sometimes it's just not the truth, like what you get out there.
Absolutely. I think this question, I love to ask it, but I always know what the answer is. It's very common with sales teams that when you ask why they close, the answer is going to be, because I'm good. But if
have a good relationship.
Exactly, because I've been good. But if you ask why did we lose the deals? Because marketing didn't provide this, or customer success was bad, and so like good things is on them, bad things is on others.
That's true.
So it's definitely something that it helps to have someone external taking this over, and to clarify early what you're expecting from these different initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking a bit to the future, how would you say will enablement
develop over the next 2-3 years, but also how will sales itself change in a way? Like what do you believe, what are we going to see in the market?
Yeah, I think, both for sales and enablement, we are seeing a trend where more and more you see the success of businesses not relying exclusively on direct customer acquisition, but also on retention, upselling, cross-selling, and partnerships.
Yes.
So I think this is definitely a big trend where it's no longer solely on sales, but it's more a go-to-market approach. The entire success is really, and the revenue achievement is really on the entire go-to-market approach. It has to be successful. And so that's one thing that I think for sales enablement. I don't think sales enablement is really a thing anymore. It's more like go-to-market or revenue enablement, because it wouldn't make sense to be looking only on this one team in the entire go-to-market engine.
Yeah.
So that's a big trend that I've seen already happening, and I'm always encouraging it more and more, saying that that's also why when I founded Scaling Edge, I focused on calling it go-to-market enablement or revenue enablement, because it's talking to more teams than just sales. And I think with that, one of the consequences is that enablement is being seen more and more as a leadership function, not so much only the pure reactive and supportive function, but something that you actually need to think about during the process. Like one example that I've seen is regarding product launches, for example. Big product launches in a business where for a long time it was mostly product, a bit of marketing, a bit of finance and operations when it comes to the paperwork to have it done, and then they would just roll it out. But more and more I see enablement being involved early on to define how do you actually roll out, how do you ensure that your sales teams are going to pitch in the right way, that your customer success and your account management are going to speak to existing customers and upsell them to that. So this is one example where enablement is also getting a seat at the table and more looking at a leadership function rather than just being on the side and an afterthought.
We had like a GTM breakfast a couple of months ago here, also in the Better Trust office, where we also talked about how we better align sales, customer success, marketing. Sales enablement was not part of the panel, but I think what one of my takeaways there was also like we need to break these silos, right? Yeah. Because normally what's happening is that everyone's working on their own, and then it's more like everyone's working against each other. But I think like how do you actually manage to do that is by just setting up regular meeting structure to say, okay, this is our main goal as a company, this is how it trickles down to the different departments, and now how can we work together to make this happen, right? So I think having a good plan and working on the same goals, because this is what I've seen a lot also with SDRs and AEs, for example, is just the AE wants to have revenue and the SDR needs to bring the meetings.
Exactly.
So it's not connected to each other, and it's just like the quality of meetings is just very low. So just aligning and bringing people together, I think, is important. Yeah, definitely. We're already a bit coming to the end already. It was really nice chat with you, talking about enablement, Ambre. And I wish you all the best for your new business. And maybe last question also to the audience: where can people find you? Where can they get more of your insights? I heard from you that you also went to different podcasts a couple of days ago. So maybe you can share a bit with the audience where they can find you and reach out to you. Definitely. I mean, LinkedIn is the obvious one. I do have a newsletter also where I like to share on a bi-weekly basis some insights on enablement, and really the goal for me with this is to demystify enablement. I'm really not a big fan of buzzwords, so I'm trying to break it down as straightforward as possible. So if you want to learn about enablement and just also get in touch with me, this is the way to go. It's called Scaling Smarter, and it's on my profile. And I also have the Scaling Edge business that I just launch, where I'm always happy to get into conversation and trying to clarify anything that needs to be clarified when it comes to enablement. Very nice. So thanks for being my guest today. Thank you so much for the invitation. You're welcome. And for everyone who wants to learn more, as said, please follow on LinkedIn. And everyone who's not doing it already, please also recommend the podcast to your colleagues. Give us a follow and help us grow here also on the different channels. So see you next week and have a nice day. Happy selling, everyone.